Yes, so good morning to everyone. So let's begin today's lecture. Okay, so in the last lecture, we introduced this another notion of an non-deterministic finite automaton, which is this NFA with epsilon transitions. So these epsilon transitions are different from the normal transitions, right? In the sense that so these transitions are performed spontaneously. So if you are in a state and if there is an edge, right, if there is a transition out of that state which is labeled with epsilon, then you can perform the transition uh, at any time, right, without consuming any of the symbols on the input. So in order to uh, in order to then define the transition function, right, or rather the extended transition function, the extended delta, uh, for this NFAs with epsilon transitions, we introduce this notion of a closure, right, of a state. So the closure of a state is the set of all states that you can reach purely using epsilon transitions. So, for example, the closure of the closure of the set, the state A, right, is the set containing A, only A, while the closure of the state E, right. So here, from the state E, I can reach B, C, and D only using epsilon transitions, and that's why the closure of the state E is the set B, C, D, and E. And then we define this extended delta function using this closure, right? So we said that so now the delta hat of some state A, right, and epsilon is defined to be the closure of that state, and delta hat of A comma WA is defined as shown, right, in this slide, right, where you first consider all states that you can reach by consuming the word by consuming the string W, the prefix W, right? And then you consider the next state that you can take, right, by consuming the symbol A, after which you also take the closure of those set of states. Uh, so in other words, if you want to find out which state that you can reach, right, in the automaton, uh, when you consume a string, right, you must also now consider the epsilon transitions that you can make, and these epsilon transitions can be made anywhere, right? So they can be made before consuming a symbol or after consuming a symbol as well. So for example, this delta hat of A comma 0, 1. So in order to calculate that, you need to consider all paths in this DFA uh, uh, which have this label 0, 1, but which can also be interspersed with epsilon transitions. So for example, here, right, so for 0, 1, beginning from the state A, you can reach, for example, C, right, by going through this path from A to E, then E to B, and then B to C. And similarly, you can also reach D by going through this path A to E, and then E to C, and then C to D. So these are the only states that you can reach after consuming the entire string 0, 1, also taking into account the epsilon transitions. So once we know which states we can reach, right, after consuming a string, we can then define the language of this epsilon NFA. So this is nothing but all those strings which when on consumption, right, when we process them, they take you to one of the final states. So now the question arises, right? So this is the same question that we dealt with in the case of NFAs and DFAs as well. Right? So how do we compare the computational power, right, of this NFA and epsilon NFA? So does adding epsilon transitions make the NFA more powerful? Can it now accept more complex languages? So let's do the same exercise, right? So now let's compare the power of an NFA and an epsilon NFA. Right? So the first question that we ask is that is the NFA more powerful than the epsilon NFA? So which means that if there is a language, just like there exists an NFA which accepts that language, and thus there exists an epsilon NFA which also accepts that language. So there the answer is clearly yes, right? Because so every NFA is an epsilon NFA. Right? So this epsilon NFA just gives more capability, right? Just that you can also have transitions which are labeled with epsilon. But if you don't have any transitions labeled with epsilon, then you just get an NFA itself. So therefore, if there is an NFA which accepts some language, then there also exists an epsilon NFA, which is the same NFA, and it accepts the same language. So now we ask the other question, right? So is an epsilon NFA more powerful than an NFA? Which means that if there is a language such that there exists epsilon NFA, which accepts that language, then does there exist an NFA as well, which accepts that language? So now, in order, so as it happens, right, this converse is also true, right? Which means that NFA, the epsilon NFAs are no more powerful than NFAs. Right? Both of them have the same power. But in order to prove that, right, we basically need to take an epsilon NFA and we need to construct this a regular NFA, right, without epsilon transitions, which accepts the same language. So the epsilon NFA has this epsilon transitions. So we need to somehow get rid of these epsilon transitions and basically construct a normal NFA, but it should accept the same language. So here again, right, so we will do something which we very similar to what we did for the subset construction proof, right, where we constructed this DFA, right, and we showed that this DFA accepts the same language as the NFA, right. So here also we are going to construct the NFA, and then we will prove that this NFA also accepts the same language as the epsilon NFA. And so here the construction is simpler, right, because we only need to take care of the epsilon transitions. Right? So what we will do, right, is that we will remove all the epsilon transitions from the epsilon NFA, and at the same time we will also combine them with the previous transition on a real input, right? So that essentially the transitions on real input symbols, right, will now be different in the NFA. Right? So in order to make this more concrete, let's do this formally. So let's say that we start with some epsilon NFA. So this epsilon NFA is given by its phi tuple. So there is the set of states Q, the input alphabet sigma, the start states S, and the set of final states F, and there is this transition function delta E. So this transition function delta E, right, in particular, right, also so its signature is different, right? So its signature is going to be Q cross sigma epsilon to 2 to the power Q. So it's also going to have so it's also going to include epsilon transitions, right? So we need to get rid of those epsilon transitions. So our goal is to construct an ordinary NFA, right? So to construct this ordinary NFA, right, let's look at the components of this ordinary NFA. Right? So this ordinary NFA is going to have the same set of states Q. Right? The input alphabet is also the same, which is sigma. The start states are different, right? So I should say S start states. So there is a set of start states S prime, which is different from the start states of the original epsilon NFA, right? But they are still a subset of Q. Okay? And we also have a set of final states, so they remain the same F, and the transition function is also different, right? So now this transition function is delta N. Its signature is also going to be different, so it's going to be from Q cross sigma to 2 to the power Q. Okay. So two things have changed, right? So the set of start states have changed, and the transition function has changed, right? Otherwise, all the rest of the things are remain the same. So let's see what are these changes, right? So what is S prime and what is delta N, and how do they relate to S and delta E? So delta E and S are so delta E is the transition function of the original epsilon NFA, and delta N is the new transition function that we're going to construct for the ordinary NFA. Right. So first, let's look at delta N. Right? So delta N is very straightforward. Right? So this delta N is defined in terms of delta E, right? As follows. Right? So this delta N of Q comma A is defined as the closure of this set of states, right? Which is delta E of Q comma A. So essentially, all we have done, right, is that we have asked this question, right? That, okay, if you are in a state Q, right, and you get the input symbol A, then what are all the transitions that the epsilon NFA can make? So the epsilon NFA can make the transitions. So the epsilon NFA can make transitions on the input symbol A itself, and it can also make transitions on epsilon. Right? So in order to also consider those transitions, we take the closure of the set of states. Right? So the closure of delta E of Q comma A is defined to be delta N of Q comma A. So in essence, we have basically combined all the epsilon transitions, right, that that you can make with the transitions on the previous input. So if you consume the symbol A, right, after consuming the symbol A, the epsilon NFA can make epsilon transitions, right? But since the ordinary NFA cannot make those transitions, so we have just combined them together, right? So you can say that, okay, so if there is a state, right, let's say if there is Q and you have a transition on A, and then you also have an epsilon transition. So let's call this as Q prime and Q double prime. Then so this is in the epsilon NFA. So in the ordinary NFA, right? So we are going to remove this epsilon transition. And we're going to add this transition on A itself. So this is because the closure of Q prime is going to contain Q double prime. So this is in the epsilon NFA. And this is in the ordinary NFA. Okay. And now let's look at what about the start states, right? So the start states of the ordinary NFA are defined to be S prime, right? And this S prime is simply the closure of the original start states, right, of the epsilon NFA. So the start states S prime in the ordinary NFA are the closure of the start states in the epsilon NFA. Right. So as I said, the intuition is that this delta n basically incorporates all possible epsilon transitions into the previous transition which uses A. So now that we have constructed this NFA, ordinary NFA for an epsilon NFA, we need to prove that they accept the same language. Right? So again, right, we can prove this by induction on the length of the word, right? So this is something that we also proved in the subset construction, right? Where so in this case we can show that in this ordinary NFA, right, this delta hat n of s prime comma w for any word w is equal to delta hat e of s comma w, which means that if you begin in the start states of the epsilon NFA, right, and you process the string W, right, you will reach some set of states. Those will be the same set of states that you reach in the ordinary NFA if you begin from this set of start states S prime and process the word W. So proving this formally is pretty straightforward, right? So I will leave this as a homework. So you just use induction on the length of the string, and the proof proceeds in a very similar manner to subset construction. Okay. So if you prove this, this means that the epsilon NFA is going to accept a string here if and only if the ordinary NFA accepts it. Right. So let's look at this example that we also saw, right, in the last lecture. Right. So in the left hand side we have the transition table, right, of the epsilon NFA, and on the right hand side we have the transition table of this new ordinary NFA we have constructed. So notice that there is this column which is labeled by epsilon in the epsilon NFA, but there is no column for epsilon in the ordinary NFA. Right? And the transitions are different. Right? So in particular, there is just one change in the transition, right? Which is that this transition for A and symbol 0. So it now also includes the epsilon closure, or rather the closure of this set E, or rather the state E, right, which is the state B, C, D, and E. So this is the equivalent NFA, which is going to accept the same language as the epsilon NFA. So this is the end of the section on epsilon NFA. Right? So are there any questions regarding this epsilon NFA or the construction that we used? Okay. So in the last lecture, we briefly discussed, so there was this question, right, that why is it that NFAs are useful, right? Uh, okay, Sanchit is asking that if there are multiple start states, how will it be equal to a DFA? So I think, so are you talking about the NFA to DFA conversion or the uh, epsilon NFA to NFA conversion? Right? Because an NFA allows multiple start states, right? So, so in the last lecture, we saw this NFA to DFA conversion, right? Where we only had a single start state for the DFA. But in this lecture, we have seen an epsilon NFA to NFA conversion. Right? So the epsilon NFA can have multiple start states, and the NFA can also have multiple start states. Yeah, Vineet is saying that for the DFA construction, the start state was S. So this is a set of states in the original NFA, but it's a single state in the DFA, right? Because we said that in the subset construction, every set of states, a state in a DFA is a set of states of the NFA. Okay. So in the last lecture, there was this question, right, that why are NFAs useful, right? So one of the reasons is that I mean there are many reasons, right? So NFAs uh, are more easier to construct than DFAs, right? Because there are fewer restrictions. Uh, in particular, right, NFAs will help us to prove many important properties of regular languages because we know that NFAs also accept regular languages. Right? So you will see that many of the closure properties of regular languages can be very easily proved using NFAs. But the other reason is that NFAs can be exponentially succinct than DFAs, which means that if you have a language, so there are languages for which the smallest DFA which accepts that language, right, will have exponentially more number of states than the smallest NFA that can accept that language. So, so to make this more formal, right, uh, let us look at this language. So suppose we want to design a DFA which accepts the language. So this is the set of strings from the binary alphabet such that the nth symbol of W from the right is 1. So we have seen a couple of instances of this language, right, for n equal to, I think, 2 and n equal to 4. Right? But let's in general consider the general language, right, where we say that so basically this language has strings where if you count the nth symbol from the right, then that symbol is 1. Okay. So suppose we want to design a DFA for this. Now we will show that we will show that this DFA must have at least 2 to the power n states. So we will prove this formally. Okay. And then we will show that an NFA, so there is an NFA which accepts the same language, and this NFA has order of n states. So, so this means that for this particular language, NFA is exponentially succinct than the DFA. So let's first prove that any DFA which accepts this language must have at least 2 to the power n states. So we'll prove this by contradiction. So suppose that there exists a DFA-M which accepts this language and it has less than 2 to the power n states. Okay. So once again, right, so this language is the set of all strings where the nth symbol from the right is 1, nth symbol from the end is 1. And we are assuming that there exists a DFA which accepts this language and which has less than 2 to the power n states. Okay. Right. So now, using this, we can make this conjecture, right? So the conjecture is that there must exist 2 different strings of length n. Right? So these 2 different strings are a1, a2 up to an, and b1, b2 up to bn. These are different strings, right? Such that both of these strings, right? When you process the DFA on both of these strings, they would lead to the same state. Let's say some state q in the DFA. So we are saying that the DFA has less than 2 to the power n states. And if that is the case, then there must exist 2 different strings of length n, which when you process them on the DFA, they must lead to the same state q. So can anyone answer why is this true? Okay, yeah. So Alan and Costa are saying pigeonhole principle. Okay, so how does the pigeonhole principle apply here? Okay, Costa is saying that number of binary strings are 2 to the power n. Yeah, okay, so that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Right? So the pigeonhole principle, right, is that so if you have n pigeons, right, and if you have n minus one holes, then if you want to assign pigeons to holes, right, then there must exist at least one hole, right? There will exist exactly one hole which has two pigeons in it. So here, right, we have so there are 2 to the power n different strings, right, of length n, but our DFA has the number of states in the DFA is less than 2 to the power n, which means that if you process all of those strings, and if you look at the states in which you will finally end up in the DFA, and because there are less than 2 to the power n states in the DFA, but there are 2 to the power n strings, there must exist two strings which after processing lead to the same state. So yeah, so that's the reason, right? So because of the pigeonhole principle, and since there are 2 to the power n different strings of length n. Okay, so now let's take two of such strings. Right? So these are a1 a talk to n and b1 b talk to bn. So if you process both of them on the DFA, they lead to the same state q. Okay. Okay, so what can we do next, right? So since these are different, right? So which means that they must differ at some location. So let's say that they differ in the first location itself. So let's say that a1 is not equal to b1. So suppose a1 is not equal to b1, right? Which means that so since this is the binary alphabet, right? So either a1 could be 0 and b1 could be 1, or b1 would be 0 and a1 would be 1. But in that case, Q must be both an accepting and a non-accepting state. Right? So this is the nth symbol from the right. Okay. So if a1 is 1, right, then the DFA must accept this string, right, a1 equal to n, which means that Q must be an accepting state. But at the same time, it must also be a non-accepting state, right, because it must reject the string b1 b2 up to bn because b1 is 0. And the same argument holds for vice versa, right? If a1 is 0 and b1 is 1. So here, right, the crucial thing is that the DFA, it basically constrains the constraint of the DFA is that once you process a string, right, you will always end up in a unique state. So that's the argument that we're using here, right? To show that so basically this queue must be both an accepting and a non-accepting state. So this is not possible in a DFA, right? So in a DFA, a state can be either accepting or it can be non-accepting. Right? It can be both. So this is a contradiction. So therefore, A1 cannot be not equal to B1, right? Which means that A1 must be equal to B1. So now let's say that there is some other index, right? Some index I, where these two strings will differ. So there is some other index I for which AI is not equal to BI. Okay, so let's assume that. So suppose AI is not equal to BI. So now, in this case, right, we are going to have let's append zeros, right, then to both of these strings. So we will append I minus one zeros to both of these strings. Right? So we consider this string A1 at A1 A2 up to AN, followed by I minus one zeros, and similarly B1 B2 up to Bn, followed by I minus one zeros. Yeah. So what can we say about these two strings? So first of all, yeah, what is the state of the DFA, right, after processing either of these strings? Yeah, yeah, Vineet is saying, yeah, it's the same state, right? That's correct, right? So because we know that after A1, A2 up to AN and B1, B2 up to Bn, we reach the same state, right? And then we are processing the same set of strings, right? Which is the same string, right? The same sequence of symbols, which is the zeros. So therefore, we are going to reach the same state. Okay. Uh, Right. So what else can we say, right? So since we have appended I minus one zeros, right, and we know that AI is not equal to B. So what happens when you take the last n, uh, the last n symbols, right, in this string, right, the suffix of length n. Right? So you will see that AI and BI, right, are going to be at the nth position from the right in these two strings. Right? So we have these two strings, right, where uh, one of them has one uh, in the nth position from the right, and the other one has zero in the nth position from the right. Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost the connection for a minute there. Okay. Right. So we're doing this proof, right, for y for this DFA, right? The DFA which accepts this string must have at least 2 to the power, which accepts this language must have at least 2 to the power n states. Right? So we considered this case where A1 not equal to B1, and we showed that in that case, the DFA the DFA must so A1 cannot be not be equal to B1, right? Similarly, right, if we consider this AI not equal to BI, right, then in this case, right, we have these two strings, right, A1, A2 up to AN, which is followed by I minus 1 zeros, and B1, B2 up to BN is also followed by I minus 1 zeros. And both of these strings lead to the same state. And moreover, they have different symbols, right, in the nth position from the right. So which means that, again, right, so they have different symbols in the nth position from the right. So this is another contradiction, right, because the DFA, processing these two strings in the DFA lead you to the same state, right? But they have different symbols in the nth position from the right. So the DFA won't be able to distinguish them because to accept one and to reject other, right? The state that it reaches, right, must be both an accepting and a non-accepting state, which is not possible. So this completes the proof, right? That this means that we cannot have any DFA which accepts this language and which has less than 2 to the power n states. So any DFA which accepts this language must have at least 2 to the power n states. So now, but there is a very simple NFA which accepts this language and which in fact has, well, in this case, it has n plus 1 states. So this is very similar to the NFAs that we saw earlier for different instances of this language. Right? So here you basically in the start state Q0, right? There is non-determinism involved, right? So at some point, right, you will guess that which is the nth symbol from the right, and at that point, you are going to make this transition from Q0 to Q1. Okay? And then if your guess was correct, right, then when you finally reach the end of the string, you will be in the final state Qn. Right? Uh, so which means that there is at least so there exists at least one choice, right? So if the string in fact has one in the nth symbol from the right, then there is a correct choice to be made. There's a correct guess to be made, such that the NFA is going to end up in the final state. And so in fact, right, so you can formally prove this, right, using this argument, right, that the NFA could be in state Qi, right, if the ith symbol from the right is 1. So this is true for I equal to 1 to n. So you can prove this using induction. Right, again, that the NFA could be in the state Qi if the ith symbol from the right is 1. So which means that, so for I equal to n, this means that the NFA could be in the state Qn if the nth symbol from the right is 1. And that implies the result, right? Because Qn is a final state. Okay, so this means that so for this language, right, there exists an NFA whose size is linear, right, in n, but there does not exist any DFA, right, which has less than 2 to the power n states. Right? So any DFA which accepts this language must have 2 to the power n states. So this means that NFAs can be exponentially more succinct than the DFAs. So any questions regarding this proof? Okay, in the last statement, so Vinith is asking in the last statement, will if and only if work? So okay, so you're asking that okay. So if the ith symbol from the right is 1, then the NFA could be in state Qi, but the NFA could be in state Qi, right? So in this case, if and only if is going to work, right? Because so the NFA can be it can be in state Qi would imply that the ith symbol from the right is 1. So that's the only way in which the NFA could be in state Qi. And similarly, right, if the ith symbol from the right is 1, then the NFA could be in state Qi. So yeah, it will work. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, so let's summarize what we have learned so far, right, about NFAs, DFAs, and epsilon NFAs, right? So DFAs, NFAs, and epsilon NFAs, right? They all accept exactly the same set of languages, which are the regular languages. The NFAs are easier to design, uh, and they may have exponentially fewer states than a DFA, but only a DFA can be implemented, right? So which means that if you want to move to a real world system, right, then you can only implement a DFA, right? You cannot implement NFAs or epsilon NFAs, but they are still useful abstractions, right? So uh, they are easier to design, right? And they have exponential fewer states, and they will help us, right, to prove properties about regular languages. So with that, I'm going to end this section on NFAs. So let's move to regular expressions. Okay. Right. So what are regular expressions, right? So regular expressions are basically an algebraic way, right, to describe languages. So in particular, they are an algebraic way to describe regular languages. So regular languages are all the languages that are accepted by a DFA, right, or an NFA or an epsilon NFA. So, but regular expressions, right, are another way to describe the same language, right? But they are an algebraic way. So they describe exactly the regular languages. And if E is a regular expression, then we use this notation L of E to denote the language that it defines. So every regular expression is going to define a language. This language will be a regular language, and we'll use this notation L of E in order to describe that language, or to denote that language. So why are regular expressions useful, right? So there is a so there are many theoretical applications of regular expressions, but regular expressions also have many practical applications. So we touched upon this briefly in the introduction, right? The very first course, in the very first lecture of this course, right? So regular expressions are used to describe patterns, right, that we want to search for. So if you have a large corpus of text, right, and if you want to search for a specific pattern in that text, so you can use regular expressions to describe those patterns very succinctly, right? So a common example is that in Unix, right, in the bash, we can use commands like rm star.c, right, or something like that, right? So here, right, the star is basically a regular expression, right? So it's a pattern, and this pattern matches any file, right? So this is a very powerful way to describe something, right? So we can just use star, right? And the implicit sort of assumption, right, is that the star is going to match any file name. So we are going to match any file name .c. So we don't, no matter what the file name is, that will be matched by this expression, by this pattern star.c. So, so to summarize, right, the regular expressions are a very powerful way in order to succinctly describe very complex patterns. So, if you want to search right, for some complex pattern, right, in the text, right, then you don't need to explicitly enumerate, right, all of the matching instances of that pattern. You can just summarize it using this regular expression. Yeah. So let's formally define what is a regular expression, right? So we will use an inductive definition for regular expression, which means that we will have some base cases, right? And then we will have the inductive definition. So let's look at the bases. So let's fix an alphabet sigma first. So sigma is our alphabet, which is the set of symbols. Now, so if A is a symbol in sigma, then this boldface A. So this boldface A is a regular expression, and the language of this boldface A is simply the string A. So note that there are three different ways in which we're using A, right? So whenever this small A, right, belongs to sigma, then it's a symbol. Right? Then we have this boldface A, which is a regular expression, and then we have this string A itself. So this set of the string A is the language containing just one string, and that string is of length 1. The second basis is epsilon. Right? So this boldface epsilon is a regular expression, and the language of this boldface epsilon is simply the set containing the string epsilon. So here, this is the empty string, right, or the null string. And finally, this boldface phi, right? This is also a regular expression, and the language of this boldface phi is the empty set. Okay? So whenever we use boldface, right, we mean a regular expression, and with every regular expression, we associate this language, which is the set of strings. In this case, over sigma star. So L of A is simply the set containing the string A. L of epsilon is the set containing the string epsilon, and L of phi is the empty set. Okay, so these are the three bases. So now let's look at the inductive cases. Right? So if E1 and E2 are two regular expressions, then E1 plus E2 is another regular expression. Right? And this language of E1 plus E2 is simply defined as the language of E1 union the language of E2. So if E1 and E2 are regular expressions, right, then we can construct a new regular expression by adding them together. Right? So E1 plus E2, and the language of this new regular expression is going to be the union of the languages of the two original regular expressions. And the second induction is through concatenation. So if E1 and E2 are regular expressions, then this E1, E2, right, which is the concatenation of E1 and E2, is another regular expression. And the language of this regular expression is obtained by concatenating the languages of the two regular expressions. So by concatenating L of E1 with L of E2. And finally, this is the third inductive case. So if E is a regular expression, then this E star, right, this asterisk of E, this is another regular expression. And the language of this regular expression is the asterisk of the language of the original regular expression. So L of E star is L of E and whole star. So remember that this L of E whole star, right? So how did we define this L of E whole star? So this was defined as so this is basically the set of all strings, right? Of which set of all strings W1, W2 up to Wn for some n greater than or equal to 0, where each of this Wi is in L of E. So you can basically concatenate, right, any number of strings from the language L of E, and all of these resulting strings will be in L of E whole star. So this was originally defined as this L of E0 union L of E1 in L of E square and so on. Okay. So when n is equal to 0, the string is epsilon. So this E star is a regular expression, right? And its language, right, is basically the asterisk of L of E star. Okay. So are there any questions regarding the definition of regular expressions? So this actually completes the definition of regular expressions. Right? So we just have the three base cases, right, corresponding to a symbol, the empty string, and the empty set. And then we have three more ways of constructing more compound regular expressions, right? By either adding them together, which means by taking a union, or by concatenating them, right, or by using this asterisk operator. So this is the only way in which you can construct more regular expressions. So let's look at some examples then. But before looking at examples, let's also define this precedence of these various operators. Right? So we have these three operators, right? The plus, the concatenation, and the star. So we can obviously use parentheses, right, in order to say that how do you group these operators together, right, or which operator should take precedence. But if there are no parentheses, right, then And this is what this is the precedence order that will follow. Right? So the star is going to have the highest precedence, right? Then concatenation, right? And then plus, which will have the lowest precedence. Okay? So, so for example, right, if you have this regular expression AC plus B star, so star has the highest precedence, which means that this B, right, will be B star. So the star will be associated just with the regular expression B. Uh, then concatenation has the next precedence, right? So we will concatenate. So we'll consider this regular expression AC, and finally plus has the lowest precedence. Okay. So therefore so essentially this regular expression uh, is a union of two languages, right? Which is given by AC and B star. Right? So AC is the concatenation of A and C, right? And B star is the asterate of the language B. Right? It's the asterate of the language which contains B. Okay? So the language of this is going to consist of epsilon, AC, B star, and so on. Right? So AC is coming from this boldface AC, right? And the rest of the strings are coming from B star. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's look at some examples. So first, let's consider the binary alphabet. Right? So we have this regular expression 0, 1. Right? So this is in the bold face. Right? So this means that so this is essentially concatenation, right, of two regular expressions, where one is the regular expression 0 and other is the regular expression 1. So both of those languages will contain the strings 0 and 1, and therefore their concatenation is going to contain the concatenation of those two languages. So that's why this language is 0, 1. This language of this is the language of 0, 1 plus 0. Right? So here we are first doing the concatenation and then doing the union. So that's why this language will have the strings 0, 1, and 0. Next we have this language, this hexagonal expression, right? So 0 and then 1 plus 0. So here we are using bracketing, right? So since we are using bracketing, right? So this 1 plus 0, right, is going to take is basically going to have higher precedence, right? So therefore the language of this, right, is going to be 0 and 1, and then we are going to concatenate that with 0. Right? So that's why we will have 0, 0 and 0, 0, 1 and 0, 0 in this language. The language of 0 star is epsilon 0, 0, 0, and so on. Okay. So let's look at more complex examples now. So let's look at this language. Right? So this is 0 plus 1 and then 0 plus 1 star. So this is a concatenation of two languages, right? Where the first language is a single symbol, right? It's either 0 or 1, and the second language is this asterate of 0 plus 1 star. Okay. So in fact, this language represents the set of all strings, right, with length at least 1. And so we also, so if instead of writing the 0 plus 1, right, we also sometimes write epsilon. Okay, Aaron is saying that this is 0, 1 star minus epsilon. Yeah, but so the minus operator, right, it's yeah, you can express this as 0, 1 star minus epsilon. That's correct. So this is, but the regular expression, right? So there's no minus in the regular expression. So we so instead of writing the 0 plus 1, we also use the symbol sigma, right? And the sigma sigma star, right? There is a special notation for sigma sigma star, which is the sigma plus. So whenever we write the plus, right, it means that we are considering so we are basically considering strings of length at least 1. Right? Okay. So how do we express strings of even length as a regular expression? So we have seen how to express strings of length at least one. Uh, but what if you want to express all strings of even length, right? So we want a regular expression whose language should be the set of yeah the set of all strings of even length. Yeah, anyone? Okay, when it is saying sigma sigma star and then sigma sigma star, so let me just write that. So sigma sigma star and then sigma sigma star. Okay, is this correct? Okay, why is this not correct? Okay, so this one includes all strings of length at least two. Yeah, but I'm not sure this even includes even length, right? So there could be odd length strings as well in this. So since it is sigma sigma star, right? So uh, yeah, I mean, so you could have something like let's say 0 1, right, and then 0 here. So this is not correct. Okay, Aniruddha is saying sigma sigma star. Let me write that down now. So sigma sigma and star. Okay, so is this correct? Yeah, so this is correct, right? Because uh, sigma sigma, right? So this is going to be concatenation of so this sigma sigma is just going to be strings of length two, right? And then you are going to take multiples of those, right? Uh, so that you will only have strings of even length, and this also includes epsilon. So it's very good, right? So that's correct. So in fact, yeah, this is sigma sigma star. Okay, let's do this one. Let's say we want a regular expression whose language is the strings, the set of all strings with even number of zeros. So we are essentially saying that whenever zeros appear, they must appear an even number of times. So either zeros don't appear at all, or they must appear an even number of times, right? So, but they need not be together, right? So they can be interspersed with other ones, but uh, but they must appear an even number of times. Okay. So how can we go about constructing a regular expression for this language? Any suggestions? Okay, Aniruddha is saying, so let me write this down as well. So 1 star, 0, 0 star, and then whole star. Okay. Let's see, right? So is this correct? So this is not correct, right? Yeah, here's my because you are constraining the zeros to be together. But that's just what I said, right? So you could have something like let's say 0, 1, 0, which you cannot express in this language. Yeah, but you are very close, right? So what happens if we add, let's say, a 1 star here? Yeah, yeah. So I think this one seems right. So uh, so you have zeros which always appear in even numbers, and they can be separated by any number of ones, and you can also have just ones, right? So this language is in fact correct, right? So in fact, the other way to represent this language is this 1 plus 0, 1 star 0, the whole star. So this is another representation. So these are both equivalent regular expressions. The one that we wrote above, and then this one. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so let's end the lecture there today, and we'll meet again tomorrow. Thank you.